In the fading light of the 1920s, the camera opens on a steaming locomotive slicing through the wilderness of Idaho. Robert Grainer, a quiet man with a weathered face and a steady hand, spends his days repairing bridges and laying track across endless forests. His coworkers know him as dependable but distant, a man who listens more than he speaks. The wilderness hums with life, wolves, wind, and the echo of hammers on iron. At night, by the campfire, Grainer stares into the flames, dreaming of faraway cities he'll never see. The sound of the train whistle is both comfort and curse, a song of movement he can never truly join. Grainer's life changes when he meets Gladys, a strong-willed woman running a trading post by the railway. She's warm, practical, and quick to laugh, the kind of woman who softens the hardest edges of solitude. Their courtship is quiet but filled with simple gestures, helping her repair fences, sharing a loaf of bread, or walking home beneath pine trees. Gladys listens when he talks about trains, fascinated by the world beyond her valley. When he finally proposes, she accepts with a smile that feels like sunlight breaking through clouds. Together, they start to build something lasting. A home, a future, a dream. Their marriage blossoms like spring after a long winter. They build a small log cabin near a river where the trains rumble faintly in the distance. Gladys plants wildflowers while Grainer carves furniture from fallen trees. When their daughter Kate is born, Grainer holds her in trembling hands, unable to believe something so small could feel like the whole world. The cabin fills with laughter, music, and the smell of firewood. The once lonely railroad man feels complete. The whistle of distant trains no longer sounds lonely, but alive, like the heartbeat of his new family. But peace, like trains, never stops moving. One summer, the sky turns copper with smoke. A wildfire spreads fast through the valley, devouring everything in its path. Grainer is miles away working a railroad job, racing home when word reaches him. He arrives too late, the fire has already taken everything. The cabin is ash, the trees are blackened bones, and Gladys and Kate are gone. He falls to his knees in the ruins, his voice breaking into the silence. The world that once held color now burns with memory. Days blur into years as grief consumes him. Grainer buries what little remains of his family and leaves the valley behind, carrying nothing but a locket that survived the fire. He works wherever he can, his body moving on instinct while his mind drifts into darkness. Nights are hardest. He hears their voices in the wind, feels their warmth in the flicker of firelight. The trains he once loved now haunt him, their whistles echoing like morning cries across the mountains. He becomes a man without a home, living between miles and memories. As the 1930s begin, the world modernizes, but Grainer remains a relic of the old one. He takes work maintaining remote mountain lines, deep in the wilderness. The isolation is brutal, but it's where he feels safest, among pine, snow, and silence. He chops wood by hand, sleeps under stars, and talks to no one for weeks. The railroad becomes his prayer, each hammer strike a heartbeat. Yet at night, in his dreams, he still walks through fire searching for Gladys and Kate, always just out of reach. The years etch themselves into his face like carvings on stone. His beard grows long, his hands thick with scars, his eyes dim but steady. Progress rolls on without him, new trains, new roads, new machines. The young workers who meet him on the tracks call him Old Iron. They laugh kindly, unaware that he once had a life filled with light. He watches them leave, envying their laughter, remembering what it was like to be whole. When they're gone, silence returns, his truest companion. One cold winter morning, Grainer finds a wounded dog caught in a rusted trap near the tracks. The animal snarls weakly, too tired to fight. He frees her, wraps her in his coat, and nurses her back to health. He names her Daisy. For the first time in decades, he has someone to talk to, someone who listens without judgment. Daisy follows him everywhere, sleeping beside his fire and running along the tracks. In her company, something stirs inside him, the faint pulse of life returning. Together, man and dog wander through the changing landscape. Diesel trains roar where steam once sang, and Grainer feels like a ghost watching the future unfold. Yet Daisy grounds him, reminding him that life continues even as the world moves on. They walk miles of abandoned rail, collecting scraps, trading with passing travelers. In the evenings, he reads aloud old railroad newspapers to her as if she were human. Her steady eyes tell him she understands more than words can say. One spring, Grainer meets a young photographer named Thomas, who is documenting the last of the old steam railroads. Thomas is fascinated by Grainer's stories, tales of danger, beauty, and loss. He takes a photograph of him standing beside the tracks at sunset, the dying light catching the steam behind him like smoke from the past. Grainer becomes a symbol in Thomas's eyes, the final remnant of an era fading away. For a brief moment, Grainer feels remembered. The friendship between Thomas and Grainer grows quietly. They share coffee, stories, and long silences broken only by the crackling fire. Grainer begins to open up about Gladys and Kate, his voice shaking as if the memories might crumble if spoken too loudly. Thomas listens, never interrupting. Before leaving, he gives Grainer a small notebook and says, "You should write this down. Some lives are too full to disappear." Grainer stares at the notebook long after he's gone, wondering if his story still matters. That winter, he begins to write. The words come slowly at first, like the cautious steps of a man crossing ice. He writes about love, fire, the smell of pine, the sound of hammers, and the ache of silence. He fills page after page until his hand cramps, then keeps going. Each story feels like a prayer, to remember, to forgive, to exist. When he finishes, he tucks the pages into an old tin box and hides it beneath his bed. In his dreams, Grainer walks through a forest bathed in moonlight. He hears laughter, Kate's laughter, soft and distant, carried by the wind. Sometimes he sees a woman standing by the tracks, her face half hidden by mist. When he calls her name, she fades away. He wakes with tears on his face and Daisy curled at his feet. These dreams no longer frighten him. They are proof that love endures, even in the silence between worlds. The seasons shift again. Grainer grows frail but still walks the tracks daily, Daisy trotting beside him. The new trains pass without stopping, sleek, cold, and deafening. He tips his hat to them like old friends. People from the nearby town wave to him, but he rarely answers. He belongs to another time, one that exists now only in photographs and dreams. Yet inside, he feels peace creeping back into his bones. One night, thunder cracks across the valley. Rain lashes the roof while Daisy growls toward the open door. Grainer steps outside and freezes. A ghostly train glides down the long abandoned track. No sound, no smoke, only light shimmering through the storm. Feels alive, familiar. He whispers their names, Gladys, Kate, and for the first time in years smiles. The train slows as if waiting. He takes a step forward. The next morning, the storm clears and the forest glows with dew. Neighbors find Grainer's cabin empty, the fire still warm and Daisy lying quietly outside. On the table rests his hat and a folded note with 2 words, "Gone riding." No footprints lead away from the door, only the faint echo of a whistle fading into the hills. Some swear they still see light moving along the old tracks at night. Years later, Thomas publishes a photography book called Train Dreams. The cover shows Grainer standing by the tracks, staring toward the horizon, half in shadow and half in light. The book becomes a quiet sensation, not for fame, but for its haunting stillness. Readers say they can feel the wind, the smoke, the solitude. Grainer's image becomes a symbol of a world that vanished while no one was watching.